This is part one of my interview with Mike Licona. I'm with Dr. Mike Licona today, and he has debated many people about Jesus, including Richard Carrier and Bart Ehrman, an author of many books, including this one. It's The Case for the Resurrection of Jesus, authored with Gary Habermas, a real great resource for me. So tell us, how long did it take you to research this?
Oh, that's a good question. I think probably 4 years,
Mm-hmm.
4 years maybe.
Yeah, and a
Yeah.
lot of, I mean, if people have this book, I have it. The footnotes are extensive, and just a lot of work has gone into this book.
Of course,
Um,
that's just my research, 4 years. Gary Habermas, of
yeah,
course, had been researching it a whole lot longer than that.
right. Um, if I can just get back to the Richard Carrier comment that I made, I randomly came across one of his videos, and just the other day, and in it, he presents a point of view that says Jesus didn't even exist at all. Is that common among scholars these days? I mean, he seems to present it that way.
Yeah, no, it's very uncommon. You might have as many historians who deny the Holocaust as you do
Yeah,
historians of Jesus who deny that he existed. It's a very fringe position.
right.
I don't think the arguments for it is very good, and that's why the overwhelming majority of critical scholars today reject that proposal.
So, how did your interview with him or your debate with him? How did that go then?
Well, we did not debate on whether Jesus existed.
Okay,
Um, we both times we debated it was on the resurrection of Jesus.
okay,
Um, I thought it went really well. In fact, after the first one, that was at UCLA,
okay.
um, and after the first one, the following morning, I had an email in my in my account that a guy that was there who was a psychology major, and he said that he was on the front row with a few of his friends, and he says, "You don't understand, here at UCLA we get our faith bashed all the time." Now this is 2004. He
Right.
said we get our faith bashed all the time, and he said, you know, I you presenting the evidence for the resurrection of Jesus was encouraging beyond words.
Mm.
And he told me shortly after that that he had decided, his faith was so strengthened by it that he had decided to go into full-time Christian ministry
Wow,
as a
really?
result.
Yeah.
After the second debate, which was at Washburn University in Topeka, Kansas, I'm not sure what year that was, maybe 2009, somewhere
Okay.
around there, and maybe 2010. And after the debate, this girl came up to me and introduced herself to me, and she said, "Look, I came to this debate tonight as an atheist. I came to Washburn University as a freshman as a Christian, but the faculty and students were so anti-Christian here that I just felt a lot of peer pressure. I ended up giving up my faith.
Sure.
I came to the debate this evening just out of curiosity." She says, "I'm in a second semester junior. And as a result of this, I'm coming back to the Christian faith, and I can't wait to get back into Scripture." So I encouraged her to get involved in a campus ministry so
Right.
that she could fellowship with other believers. And yeah, so that was pretty neat. I thought that night, the prayers of her parents and grandparents had been answered
Yeah.
because they'd been praying for her, I'm sure, for the last 2 years.
Sure.
And so it was pretty neat. I see so much fruit that comes, spiritual fruit that comes about as a result of debates.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, this book to me, I mean, I've been a Christian a long time since I was 10. I'm 60 now, and but again, I had these questions like, okay, I know I believe the Bible 100%, but somebody that doesn't, how do I back up what I believe outside sources? So I did some research, and then I found this book, and I thought, wow, I'm gonna really dig into it, and I've I've really been just blown away, and really the the assassination of Charlie Kirk is what really um, oh, encouraged me. I don't know if that's the right word, but it really kind of prodded me to go. You know what? This is pretty serious, and he was so solid in his faith, and facing the people that spoke to him that, and he said in an interview that he was a his goal first was to win souls for Jesus.
Mm.
Secondly, was to be involved in politics. So, I mean, that was very encouraging. And I'm retired now. I have the time, and what a great outlet the internet has become for that. So yeah, that's great. Okay, so for people that have not read this book, again, it's The Case for the Resurrection of Jesus. Gary Habermas, Michael Licona. So for people that haven't read that book, as I mentioned, the outside biblical sources. Could you give us a heads up on that?
Um, yeah, so I mean, there are a number of non-Christian sources. When you say non-biblical, I'm assuming you mean non-Christian,
Yep.
because there are Christian non-biblical sources,
Okay.
and some of them credible. Like you got Polycarp, who is probably a disciple of the Apostle John, who writes, and
Right.
so we learn some neat things from him. Clement of Rome, possibly, perhaps, probably a disciple of the Apostle Peter.
Hmm.
Um, anyway, non-Christian sources.
Yeah.
There's Josephus from the end of the first century, and he mentions Jesus' death, and I believe he also mentions that his disciples were claiming that he rose from the dead and had appeared to them. So you got Josephus. You have Tacitus, who is one of the greatest Roman historians, perhaps the
Right.
greatest Roman historian.
Okay.
He mentions the death of Jesus, and then he says shortly after his disciple, his this superstition. He calls it mischievous superstition. So he was kind of hostile to the Christian faith,
Right.
which
Right.
makes him even more valuable because he's
Sure.
biased in the opposite direction, right?
Yeah.
Um, so uh, he's saying that this mischievous superstition broke out again in Judea shortly after his death. He says Christianity was checked for the moment, then it broke out again in Judea where it started, and then it spread throughout the world, even the capital Rome itself.
Hmm.
So that, although it doesn't mention the resurrection of Jesus, it's entirely consistent with the apostolic claim that he rose from the dead. It makes best sense of that. And it does mention Jesus' execution by the Romans. You have Lucian of Samosata, who
Right.
was a Greek satirist in the middle of the second century. He did not like Christianity, but he mentions Jesus' death, his execution by the Romans. Um, you've got Marabar Serapion, who was a Jewish prisoner who was later executed. We have a letter right before his execution that he wrote, and he mentions the execution of Jesus. So you have a number of these non-Christian sources who are mentioning Jesus's death and or his resurrection, or at least something consistent with it.
Okay. So let's go with the minimal facts argument that you guys talked about in the book. If you could just explain that for our viewers, that'd be great too.
Well, this is something that Gary Habermas came up with in his doctoral research, I think in the mid 70s.
Okay.
So over 50 years ago,
Wow.
or about 50 years ago. So he talked about, he wanted to look at, there's a lot of disagreement amongst historians about just about everything,
Yeah.
even in non-religious, non-Jesus matters, they disagree on a whole lot of stuff. In fact, historians don't even agree on a definition of history or what it is that historians are actually supposed to be doing. They don't agree on just about as fundamental a level as you can get. Um, so, you especially when it comes to Jesus and worldviews are involved, you're going to have a lot of disagreement. So, Atheists are never going to be able to say that Jesus rose from the dead because they don't believe God exists. They don't believe in miracles. So they have to go with some other kind of explanation. And likewise, to be fair, Christians in their faith, you're probably not going to have a Christian denying that Jesus rose from the dead. They might say, well, historical investigation can't prove that he did or show with a good degree of certainty, like my friend Dale Allison would say, historical investigation can only go so far. It could show that the disciples had experiences. They interpreted as appearances of the risen Jesus, but historical investigation can't go any further than that, basically, right? So they're going to disagree on a lot of things. So what Habermas did in his study said, well, okay, look, let's just look at some facts about Jesus that are relevant to his fate, that are so strongly supported by the data that the vast majority of scholars grant them as facts.
Okay.
If we can build a case for the resurrection based on those facts, then it'd be a pretty strong case for the resurrection. So he came up with 12 facts. Okay, 12 facts. And then he said, just based on these 12 facts, minimal facts, we can give a good case for the resurrection. Then he said, tell you what, let's do it this way. You choose any 3 or 4 of those 12 facts. And, by the way, those 12 facts would only be pretty much the majority of scholars, wouldn't have to be the vast majority. So 51% or better. And then he said, tell you what, you pick any 3 or 4 of those, and we can build a strong case for the resurrection. And then he kind of morphed into it a little bit differently and said, I'll tell you what, let's just limit this to, and he's done different numbers at different times. I think he's doing 6 right now in his magnum opus. In our book, he did 4. We did 4 plus 1. But they would be facts that are agreed on by the vast majority of scholars. And he said, let's just take these facts and we can build a really strong case for the resurrection based only on those. So if someone is going to come against the resurrection hypothesis, you either have to show that our method is wrong, or you have to dispute the facts that we've chosen and say, well, no, those aren't really facts. I don't accept those. And the response of the minimal facts approach would be, well, that's your prerogative, but the vast majority of scholars do. And what's good about that is, if I believe something like the disciples, or let's say the Apostle Paul, converted to Christianity after persecuting the church, if he does that because he has an experience he believes is the risen Jesus that appears to him, that's not saying it was the risen Jesus. It is to say that the experience was of such a nature that he interpreted it as the risen Jesus appearing to him. You're going to have to give a reason why you reject that. And you're welcome to reject it, but this is what the vast majority of scholars believe. And so therefore, because there is strong evidence for it, not because scholars say it's true, but because there's strong evidence, and the evidence is so strong, the evidence that the evidence is that strong is that the vast majority of scholars grant them as facts. And so the Christian, at least, is rationally justified in believing Jesus rose from the dead using a minimal facts argument. That's what the minimal facts argument is.
Thanks for joining me for part 1 of Mike Licona. Click above to see Mike Licona part 2, or click over here to see the full interview.